to start with Alexander Isak, though, who's informed Newcastle he wants to explore his options in this transfer window. The Premier League champions Liverpool made an informal approach for Isak last week and remain huge admirers of the Sweden striker.
Alexander Isak, Mike, was right now supposed to be in the air en route to Singapore for the next stage of Newcastle's pre-season preparations. You may remember at the weekend he travelled back to Glasgow from Austria for the friendly match against Celtic, but was then missing for the game. Eddie Howe said afterwards that he had a slight issue that they were assessing. They were managing his minutes, but also he wanted to essentially take him out of the firing line due to the speculation that was surrounding him, and he was sent back to Newcastle to recover from that injury. And I think, reading between the lines to try and get his head into a good space. And then this morning, 5 days later, Isak, as I say, was supposed to be on that flight to Singapore. The official line from the football club was that he was nursing that slight or minor thigh injury, and he would recover back here at Tyneside. And then the news broke just about an hour or so later that, as you rightly say, Isak wants to explore his options this transfer window. Of course, that on the back of an unofficial approach from Liverpool last week to Newcastle. Not what any Newcastle United supporter wanted. They wanted to be signing players this window. They thought it was the window they would finally strengthen. They've really struggled to do that, only bringing in Anthony Elanga so far, and now the fear from them that Alexander Isak could be about to go after he told the club he wants to explore his options over a potential departure.
Well, if Isak does leave, Newcastle are interested in signing the RB Leipzig striker Benjamin Sesko. Now, they've explored the conditions of a deal for the 22-year-old, and it's our understanding that Sesko's camp turned down a proposal from a Saudi Pro League club this week. Mark McAdams here to talk us through this Isak story from the Liverpool point of view. Right, when they got Ekitike, I thought, they're done. Great signing, well done. Are they going to get Isak as well? Are they serious?
They're serious about strengthening the squad over the course of this summer. They made that initial approach, an informal one, to Newcastle to explore any potential sale of Alexander Isak, and were told he's not for sale. So they moved on to other targets, which of course was Hugo Ekitike. We know that deal is done and dusted and he's now a Liverpool player. However, they are still in the market to strengthen the squad. Now, first things first, Mike, if Liverpool were to make a number of sales in advanced positions, those strikers, those wide men, then potentially they're going to have to restock them. They're going to have to find players that they believe are at the right quality for Liverpool Football Club. For example, they lose Darwin Núñez or Luis Díaz, who's been linked with Bayern Munich, or Harvey Elliott. They're going to need to replace those players. So therefore, does that interest in Alexander Isak disappear? Or do they say, well, OK, let us know the conditions of a potential deal? Since they had that initial contact last week, things have changed quite considerably, as Keith Downey has just outlined. He's told him he wants to explore potential moves this summer. He's explained that to the football club. So therefore, it's a different dynamic to what it was last week. You might find that Liverpool's interest, while they've stepped back from it for the moment, they might reignite it in the next few days.
You and I know transfers change really quickly, lickety split. Liverpool have been adamant. Luis Díaz going nowhere. That changes, doesn't it, if Isak is suddenly a target?
Absolutely, and I think Bayern Munich's opening offer, which we understand to be around 67 million euros that was rejected for Luis Díaz, is the first point of action between the two football clubs. We understand from our colleague Sky in Germany that Luis Díaz is still very much a target for Bayern Munich, so you'd imagine that a second offer will be forthcoming at some stage. And if Liverpool do start to lose players over the course of the next few weeks, then they are going to have to strengthen, and therefore the Alexander Isak thing could be something on the agenda in the next few weeks once again.
That's definitely strengthening. How do they afford him, though, given how much they've already spent this summer?
They've spent 295 million so far, and that includes potential add-ons. When you look at the fixed fees, it's around 250 million. When you look at their net spend so far in this summer's window, it's around 200 million. So they've actually been quite clever and creative. They've generated around 60 million worth of income so far. And if you were to sell Luis Díaz, Harvey Elliott and Darwin Núñez, you'd be looking at between 150 and 200 million, hence why they can go again. The other side of the coin is that Liverpool Football Club are really well run by FSG. They didn't spend virtually no money last summer, whilst turning over in excess of 600 million in their last set of financial accounts that ended in May 2024. Their next set of financial accounts will show a huge uplift in both commercial income, in revenue driven by winning the Premier League, their commercial partnerships that have all got bonuses attached because of their success. So therefore, that allows them more room to spend money. An independent football financial expert has said to me not only could they spend what they've already spent comfortably, they could spend another 200 million on top of the 295 that they've committed to in this summer and still be PSR compliant.
He's exploring options. Where do you think this one's going to end up?
Well, I mean, this is like a game of 4D chess, isn't it? Where, I mean, every piece seems to have some knock-on effect further down the chain. Yeah, I mean, I think it is no secret that Isak is one of the kind of the sought-after strikers this summer. I think what's become clarified a little bit today is the extent to which he is open to a move away. The question is where exactly that move is. Whether if this information had come out 2 or 3 weeks ago, whether he might have a few more options on the table. Liverpool, I think, they were interested before. They may well still be interested despite signing Ekitike, although I think they would have to shift on certainly Darwin Núñez, possibly Luis Díaz as well before they could make a move. Arsenal seem to be pretty deep into that. The Gyökeres deal. Can't really see PSG making a move. United and Chelsea have basically been briefing that they're not that interested. So it's an interesting one because Isak is a player who has almost catapulted himself into the elite faster than Newcastle can grow to meet that demand. He's obviously not amongst the highest earners in the Premier League. He now does have Champions League football, but he obviously feels like he has earned a move to one of the giants of Europe. The question is, where he's going to get that move in an era of, I guess, tightening budgets. So if I had to bet, I don't really bet except on darts sometimes. But I would say that Isak would probably still be a Newcastle player on the first day of the season, possibly with an improved deal.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's go to the inside of the Telegraph, Miguel, because interesting piece from Luke Edwards. Newcastle want to be the predators and not the prey. I mean, they won the Carabao Cup, first time in 70 years. They're in the Champions League. They've got Anthony Elanga over the line. They don't want to be losing, arguably, their best player. They want to be building for bigger and better things, don't they?
Well, they may want, but actions have been a little different lately. And that's despite, obviously, what was a historic landmark of winning the Carabao Cup in March. I mean, the immediate discussion that usually comes up here is that PSO rules have stopped PIF, the controversial Newcastle owners, spending what they would like on players, which has contributed to maybe Isak not being paid as well as he should, or even that a competitive team to the level of maybe potentially challenging for the Champions League or League hasn't put around them. Well, this is also a situation where we haven't yet seen, I mean, Newcastle, we've been waiting for news in the stadium. We've been news in the training ground. Also, one of the big headlines that was used to justify a controversial takeover back when it happened was we're going to see investment in the area. There hasn't been too many big headlines about that either. And at the same time as all this, and this is where I think it's really intriguing, I suppose, as regards Isak's future. Newcastle seem a little bit directionless at the moment in terms of football strategy. Paul Mitchell has left. They found it really difficult to do a deal. They've missed out on 5 big targets this summer. Eddie Howe seems to be very much the central figure in the club, beyond the power that a manager would usually have at a modern football club. And in that situation, I mean, there are issues here that feel bigger than PSR. And in that situation, as Isak's looking around, he's seen many players in the club, and even the latest one, Ekitike, who's supposed to, notionally play alongside him, rather than replace him, has gone to Liverpool. And it looks like Isak wants to go as well. Now, the one thing about this, and I think Johnny's point there about this maybe coming out 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think there's a bit of a disconnect between the public chronology of this and the chronology behind the scenes. So Craig Hope, brilliant story today where he revealed the situation that Isak wants to explore options. This, and it made public, I suppose, had been bubbling for a while, but when none of us could write, we'd all been hearing stuff about Isak. No one could actually kind of go and write it. That, yeah, he wanted out. And that, I mean, I wrote today after Craig's report today that Eddie Howe has been worried about the situation for weeks. And obviously that kind of timeline would sync up with the fact, with previous reports, that Liverpool wanted him. Now, Liverpool denied putting in a bid or making contact with Newcastle, but it was made pretty clear they were interested in Isak. That didn't happen. And obviously they moved for Newcastle's main target, Ekitike. So I just wonder about the kind of public chronology now against what happens next behind the scenes, and whether actually Liverpool are indeed comfortable with their options, which had been some of the kind of some of the talk today from people close to the club, or this is all part of this wider game. And eventually, with Newcastle's maybe leverage decreasing because they potentially have a player that doesn't want to stay, that they kind of back Newcastle into a corner a little bit. Because I mean, usually in these situations, even though It's, there's a lot of noise coming out of the club today that PIF and Yasser Al-Rumayyan absolutely don't want to sell. They want to draw a hard line. But the reality is sometimes those situations don't necessarily serve a club because you're stuck with a player who has had his head turned. My gut on this, actually, I suppose, is Liverpool will eventually do business for Diaz, although I don't think they've named their price yet to Bayern Munich. Potentially sell Darwin Núñez, and there's all sorts of kind of circular stuff there, given Darwin Núñez could potentially go to a PIF-owned club in Saudi Arabia, which could potentially embolden Liverpool's bid for Isak. But yeah, maybe if those two deals get done, because Liverpool actually have PSR headroom right now, they could do Isak, but I don't think they want a kind of a bloated squad or a bloated wage bill. I think if that happens, then we may see a very interesting last few days of the window.
We certainly might. Jonathan, Miguel there mentioned Liverpool and the kind of merry-go-round, and they might have to offload the likes of Diaz to bring in an Isak. But if we look at the back of the Express, Isak eyes exit, Liverpool on alert. A striker tells Newcastle he wants to explore the move. Let's just focus on Liverpool, because they've made some terrific signings already. Ekitike, as Miguel mentioned, who was potentially being lined up by Newcastle, has gone to Liverpool. If they've got PSR headroom, was Miguel's phrase, if they start to put the likes of Isak in there as well, that's pretty daunting for the rest, isn't it?
It is, I think, in terms of, the whole winning the transfer window meme, which I think we get to at the end of every summer, and doesn't always tally to, how things often turn out during the season. I think with Liverpool, they've strengthened at fullback, they've brought in Ekitike, they've brought in Wirtz. I think we're at the point, we're beyond the point now where you are strengthening or building from a position of strength, to the point where if as well as, of course, the tragic events that occurred this summer as well, whether we're at the point where the sheer turbulence and the pace of change at Liverpool means that there's a real kind of knock-on effect on their cohesion and their strategy and how it all fits together ahead of the start of the season. We're now reaching that point. I think obviously Liverpool needed to upgrade. I think there was no question about that. And Ekitike and Isak coming in, if that does happen in the same summer, with potentially Diaz going, with potentially Núñez going, I think that's a huge amount of upheaval for even as stable a club as Liverpool to weather without any kind of qualms or storms. And I think just because Liverpool can do this deal now because of the PSR headroom, I don't know if it's necessarily the smartest thing for them to do it right now.
Yeah, just picking up on that point that Jonathan just made, Miguel, that one of the features of Arne Slot's first year in charge was that stability. He didn't do too much in the transfer business. I think it was only Chiesa as the kind of high-profile signing that came in. Certainly wasn't in the league of maybe getting an Isak over the line. This year there's been a lot more movement. Is there a danger that could potentially destable Liverpool as they look to kind of try and gel all these players all of a sudden?
I don't necessarily think so, because the word last summer was actually that Arne Slot wanted to overhaul his front line there and basically change everything around Salah. And obviously Salah, the other factor in this is that if he does go in a year, maybe 2 years, Isak looks the kind of most obvious successor. But yeah, he wanted to change the front line last year. He didn't, I think, for a few reasons. Not least kind of there was already enough change in the club with Klopp going. There weren't necessarily the right options available in the market. And they only brought in Chiesa in the end. He didn't spend in January either. So this is essentially 3 windows in one, and where he is finally changing that front line in the way he wanted last year. I mean, it was one of the strange things, actually, that did come up when Newcastle actually beat Liverpool in the Carabao Cup final, that even though Liverpool had been brilliant for most of the season, you would have thought they looked so strong. That was weirdly married with a kind of simultaneous discussion where you could have easily said, well, Liverpool actually still do need 5 players, because maybe there's a slight staleness in some areas of the squad and some of the players that Arne Slot used all the time. So, I mean, the one thing is about bringing in that many players at once, yes, it does sometimes require time. But then I suppose look what Slot did last season, coming in and immediately having that impact. I think one of the bigger themes is actually last season, bar Liverpool winning the title, it was almost characterised by